Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sandrine Dixson-Declève, and I am the co-president of the Club of Rome and also the chair of the Economic and Societal Impacts of Research and Innovation Expert Group for the European Commission, and also work on other expert groups for the European Commission. What I really believe is so important in this 50th anniversary of the Limits to Growth, and during this time that you will be celebrating also Dana Meadows, is to remind ourselves that we do not have another 50 years. We know that the message from the limits would be that we would have a series of tipping points if we did not take into consideration population growth, continuous consumption, the way in which we use our resources, and if we did not put in place the policy actions that would be so necessary to transform our lives and ensure that we could live within the planetary boundaries. Today, we know that we are now reaching those tipping points. We know that we have the culmination of COVID, climate, and in particular in Europe, with the Ukrainian invasion on our doorstep, that we must now truly take into consideration systems approaches to the way in which we put into place policy. How do we do that? And how do we continuously use the messaging from the Limits to Growth to remind policymakers that we are in a planetary emergency, but that the message of the limits was not that there were limits to well-being or limits to lives and livelihoods thriving in the 21st century, but rather that this would be a moment in terms of taking stock of what it is to be human again, to really embrace nature, to really embrace the way in which we engage with our economic system, with our financial system, from a perspective of value-based decision-making. Placing a value on nature, placing a value on people's lives, placing a value on what truly is important as we build this new economy for well-being. What are some of the learning points, the positive shifts that we've seen since 1972? The body of environmental legislation that many of us as members of the club, but also beyond the club, have been working on to ensure that we do not have chemical pollution in the way that we did, that we do not have pollution to the air, to water, and to our soils in the way in which we had before. That body of legislation is now intact. And yes, in many ways, it did not go far enough. But what we did miss was the joining up of that policy, the understanding that actually human lives and livelihoods are not separate from the environment. They are not separate from nature. That is the opportunity that we have now, tapping into the subconsciousness post-COVID of people, working with them to remind them that actually as we moved through COVID, we were able to transform our societies for good or for bad. And there was some good. The way in which people came together through a spirit of solidarity, the way in which some countries truly did bring forward vaccines for those countries that were the most vulnerable. And clearly there were negative lessons as well, where we do not go far enough, where we realize that actually people's cry for liberties and freedom were often mistaken, linked purely to not wanting to wear a mask or not wanting to actually be part of a collective action where we were protecting everyone rather than just oneself. Those lessons are lessons that we must take with us and that we must actually now bring to the forefront as we work with policymakers and people to bring them on a journey of transformation towards well-being. So I very much hope that this celebration is another one of those moments where we remind people of the importance of the limits to growth, the importance of the emergency that we are in, and the importance of emerging from that emergency. Because we know that we have the tools, we know that we have the technology, we know that we actually have the capital. What we are lacking in some cases is the political will. So let's manifest the importance of the limits to growth and those learnings. Let's manifest the importance of the way in which we have left, hopefully, the COVID crisis. And let's bring back some of the thinking from the limits into the 21st century as an alarm bell that this is the moment that we must act together. I'm sorry that I cannot be with you, and I'm sorry that I cannot be there to celebrate one of the greatest women of our times, one of the key queens of system thinking, Donella Meadows. Good luck with your discussions.